who's still here. And if you're not here, that's cool. I know not a lot of people are into reading, but it's my thing. Oh, that is Grenada's. Oh, Vegas, you're still here? Awesome. Good morning, YouTube. Rose, go shower and get ready for your stream. Because you're going to frustrate me today. Go and get ready for your stream so I have somewhere to send people. Okay. All right, YouTube, welcome. Good morning. I'm going to be reading chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich. So for those of you that are still in the room, I look forward to your comments for the conversation, because the conversation really makes this book pop, I think. And then if you have conversation with me, it helps with the YouTube as well. So chapter 2 is on desire. So remember this book, just a quick synopsis. It was written in 1937 by Napoleon Hill, who interviewed hundreds of the wealthiest men in America. And he got 13 principles that we need to have a wealth consciousness mindset. All right. So here we go. The first step towards riches. When Edwin C. Barnes climbed down from the freight train in Orange, New Jersey, more than 30 years ago, he may have resembled a tramp, but his thoughts were those of a king. As he made his way from the railroad tracks to Thomas Edison's office, his mind was at work. He saw himself standing in Edison's presence. He heard himself asking Mr. Edison for an opportunity to carry out the one consuming obsession of his life, a burning desire to become the business associate of the great inventor. Barnes' desire was not a hope. It was not a wish. It was a keen, pulsating desire, which transcended everything else. It was definite. The desire was not new when he approached Edison. It had been Barnes' dominating desire for a long time. In the beginning, when the desire first appeared in his mind, it may have been probably only a wish, but it was no mere wish when he appeared before Edison with it. A few years later, Edwin C. Barnes again stood before Edison in the same office where he first met the inventor. This time, his desire had been translated into reality. He was in business with Edison. The dominating dream of his life had become a reality. Today, people who know Barnes envy him because of the break life yielded him. They see him in the days of his triumph without taking the trouble to investigate the cause of his success. Barnes succeeded because he chose a definite goal, placed all his energy, all his willpower, all his effort, everything back of that goal. He did not become the partner of Edison the day he arrived. He was content to start in the most menial work, as long as it provided an opportunity to take even one step towards his cherished goal. 5 years passed before the chance he had been seeking made its appearance. During all those years, not one ray of hope, not one promise of attainment of his desire had been held out to him. To everyone except himself, he appeared only another cog in the Edison business wheel. But in his own mind, he was the partner of Edison every minute of every day, from the very day that he first went to work there. Think and Grow Rich. It is a remarkable illustration of the power of a definite desire. Barnes won his goal because he wanted to be a business associate of Mr. Edison more than he wanted anything else. He created a plan by which to attain that purpose, but he burned all bridges behind him. He stood by his desire until it became the dominating obsession of his life, and finally, a fact. When he went to Orange, he did not say to himself, I will try to induce Edison to give me a job of some sort. He said, I will see Edison and put him on notice that I have come to go into business with him. He did not say, I will work there for a few months, and if I get no encouragement, I will quit. He said, I will start anywhere. I will do anything Edison tells me to do, but before I am through, I will be his associate. He did not say, I will keep my eyes open for another opportunity in case I fail to get what I want. He said, there is but one thing in this world that I am determined to have, and that is a business association with Thomas Edison. I will burn all bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. He left himself no possible way of retreat. He had to win or perish. That is all there is to the Barnes story of success. So I have a couple thoughts about that, because one of the things I've been saying for a while now is that I feel as a society, we are watered down. And I say that because we have so many options and choices that, thank you for the strawberries. We have so many options and choices to just change our minds that none of us have that determination and grit of people of the past. When you think about, I forgot, I don't know if it was Christopher Columbus or if it was another discoverer, but when they went to the New World, they burned all the ships. So they had to make it work or perish, right? And the same thing too with this guy with Barnes. He just went there on a whim to Thomas Edison's office, and he was going to do whatever he needed to do to realize his dream. I mean, how many of us can say that today? That we are so focused in our desire in what we want that we will stop at nothing to get it, right? Like even in dating, there's so many times you get into a relationship with someone and you don't want to put the work in for that person to be with that person, because I think unconsciously in the back of your mind, there's always, well, there could be somebody else. I can get somebody else. So it just feels all watered down. And this is a 30. We always try to have a plan B. Exactly. Because of all playing B or comfort zone, a lot of times we don't hit the main goal. And that's the thing. That's a true statement, that if you have a backup plan, or if you refuse to leave your comfort zone, then how would you grow? How would you learn and experience new things? A lot of times I've done things in life without a backup plan. I quit a job at a hospital in Florida, and I was newly married with a baby that was 3 months old. And I quit the job because I hated the job. And hey, Angel. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't be here. And I quit that job and put in my 2 weeks notice. And the Friday, which was my last day, I met a psychiatrist at that hospital who offered me a job. And I started on Monday, and I became the office manager of his establishment. So, in life, you got to take those chances, and you got to have that deep burning desire. We're reading chapter 2, Angel, of Think and Grow Rich. So you got to have that deep desire to want something different for yourself and be able to follow through with it to make it happen. A long while ago, a great warrior faced a situation which made it necessary for him to make a decision, which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe, whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded soldiers and equipment, then gave the order to burn the ships. Oh, here it is, that had carried them. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, "You see the boats going up in smoke. That means we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We have now no choice. We win or we die." They won. Every person who wins in any undertaking must be willing to burn his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only by doing so can one be sure of maintaining the state of mind known as a burning desire to win, essential to success. The morning after the Great Chicago Fire, a group of merchants stood on State Street, looking at the smoking remains of what had been their stores. They went into a conference to decide if they would try to rebuild or leave Chicago and start over in a more promising section of the country. They reached a decision, all except one, to leave Chicago. The merchant who decided to stay and rebuild pointed a finger at the remains of his store and said, "Gentlemen, on that very spot, I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may burn down." That was more than 50 years ago. The store was built. It stands there today, a towering monument to the power of that state of mind, known as a burning desire. The easy thing for Marshall Field to have done would have been exactly what his fellow merchants did. When the going was hard and the future looked dismal, they pulled up and went where the going seemed easier. Mark well this difference between Marshall Field and the other merchants, because it is the same difference which distinguishes Edwin C. Barnes from thousands of other young men who have worked in the Edison organization. It is the same difference which distinguishes practically all who succeed from all who fail. Every human being who reaches the age of understanding of the purpose of money wishes for it. Wishing will not bring riches, but desiring riches with a state of mind that becomes an obsession, then planning definite ways and means to acquire riches and backing those plans with persistence, which does not recognize failure, will bring riches. The method by which desire for riches can be transmuted into its financial equivalent consists of 6 definite practical steps. So we're going to go into the 6 steps, and then I'm going to open up the topic of conversation for anybody who's in here that would like to make any comments about these 6 steps. And really and truly, I'm just trying to see where you are in your life about your dreams and what you're manifesting, and see if these things are, if you've started on these things to create the life that you're looking for. Okay. So the first step is you have to fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, "I want plenty of money." Be definite as to the amount. There is a psychological reason for defining, which will be described in a later chapter. So thank you, Sir Triple. How many of you have done that first step? I know I have. How many of you decided what you want to make every month, what you want to make every year, what you want your income to look like? Do you have a number in your head? If you do, put a 1 in the comments. If you're on YouTube, you can put in the comments, or you can just say it to yourself. All right. So number 2, determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There is no such reality as something for nothing. Hey, Pumpkin, good morning. So how many of you have determined exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire? Whether it be your time, whether it be your skills, whether it be your energy, what have you determined exactly that you intend to give in return for the money? Thank you for the party hat. Thank you for the rose, Pumpkin. We're reading chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich. Okay. Number 3, establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money you desire. Number 4, create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once, whether you are ready or not, to put this plan into action. Number 5, write out a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire, name the time limit for its acquisition, state what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. Number 6, read your written statement aloud twice daily, once just before going to bed at night and once after arising in the morning. As you read, see and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money. It's important that you follow the instructions described in these 6 steps. It is especially important that you observe and follow the instructions in the 6th paragraph. You may complain it's impossible for you to see yourself in possession of money before you actually have it. Here is where a burning desire will come to your aid. If you truly desire money so keenly that your desire is an obsession, you will have no difficulty in convincing yourself that you will acquire it. The object is to want money and to become so determined to have it that you convince yourself you will have it. Only those who become money conscious ever accumulate great riches. Money consciousness means that the mind has become so thoroughly saturated with the desire for money that one can see oneself already in possession of it. To the uninitiated who has not been schooled in the working principles of the human mind, these instructions may appear impractical. It may be helpful to all who fail to recognize the soundness of the 6 steps to know that the information they convey was received from none other than Andrew Carnegie, who began as an ordinary laborer in the steel mills, but managed, despite his humble beginning, to make these principles yield him a fortune of considerably more than $100 million. Remember, this book was written in 1937. That's a huge amount. And I think a lot of us know the name Andrew Carnegie. Okay. It may be of further help to know that the 6 steps here recommended were carefully scrutinized by the late Thomas Edison, who placed his stamp of approval upon them as being not only the steps essential for the accumulation of money, but necessary for the attainment of any definite goal. The steps call for no hard labor. They call for no sacrifice. They do not require one to become ridiculous or credulous. To apply them calls for no great amount of education. They keep saying that throughout the book. So I really want you guys to hear that, because a lot of times when I meet people who are living in poverty or can't get out of debt, they say, I don't have the education or the experience. I don't have people of influence around me. And this book keeps reminding us, all these people had humble beginnings. It has nothing to do with your outside experiences. It has to do with your inner mind. The steps call for no hard labor. They call for no sacrifice. They do not require you to become ridiculous or credulous. To apply them calls for no great amount of education, but the successful application of these 6 steps does call for sufficient imagination to enable one to see and understand that accumulation of money cannot be left to chance, good fortune, or luck. One must realize that all who have accumulated great fortunes first did a certain amount of dreaming, hoping, wishing, desiring, and planning before they acquired money. You may as well know right here that you can never have riches in great quantities unless you can work yourself into a white heat of desire for money and actually believe you will possess it. You may as well know also that every great leader from the dawn of civilization down to the present was a dreamer. Christianity is the greatest potential power in the world today because its founder was an intense dreamer who had the vision and imagination to see realities in their mental and spiritual form before they were transmuted into physical. If you do not see great riches in your imagination, you will never see them in your bank account. Never in the history of America has there been so great an opportunity for practical dreamers as now exists. The 6-year economic collapse has reduced all men to the same level. A new race is about to be run. The stakes represent huge fortunes which will be accumulated within the next 10 years. The rules of the race have changed because we now live in a changed world that definitely favors the masses, those who had but little or no opportunity to win under the conditions existing during the Depression. Where is that? I missed this. Um, who had little or no opportunity to win under the conditions existing during the Depression when fear paralyzed growth and development. We who are in this race for riches should be encouraged to know that this changed world in which we live is demanding new ideas, new ways of doing things, new leaders, new inventions, new methods of teaching, new methods of marketing, new books, new literature, new features for the radio, new ideas for moving pictures. Back of all this demand for new and better things, there is one quality which one must possess to win, and that is definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants, and a burning desire to possess it. The business depression marked the death of one age and the birth of another. This changed world requires practical dreamers who can and will put their dreams into action. The practical dreamers have always been and always will be the pattern makers of civilization. I'm going to pause here and ask you guys, how many of you are practical dreamers? How many of you are putting your dreams into motion? Are you doing something every day to realize your dreams? Are you doing something every day moving in the direction of your dreams? Thanks. I'll be back. Awesome. We who desire to accumulate riches should remember the real leaders of the world always have been men who harnessed and put into practical use the intangible, unseen forces of unborn opportunity and have converted those forces or impulses of thought into skyscrapers, cities, factories, airplanes, automobiles, and every form of convenience that makes life more pleasant. Tolerance and an open mind are practical necessities of the dreamer of today. Those who are afraid of new ideas are doomed before they start. Never has there been a time more favorable to pioneers than the present. True, there is no wild and woolly West to be conquered, as in the days of the covered wagon, but there is a vast business, financial and industrial world to be remolded and redirected along new and better lines. I think that's really important because sometimes you look around and feel like the world has everything. What could I possibly contribute? And I know for myself, like I'm trying to come out as a leader in change because I'm not trying to create new institutions, if you will, but I'm trying to break down the old ones and recreate it, if that makes sense. Tolerance and an open mind are practical necessities of the dreamer of today. Let me repeat that. Tolerance and an open mind are practical necessities of the dreamer of today. Those who are afraid of new ideas are doomed before they start. Never has there been a time more favorable to pioneers than the present. True. Oh, we said all that already. In planning to acquire your share of the riches, let no one influence you to scorn the dreamer. To win the big stakes in this change world, you must catch the spirit of the great pioneers of the past, whose dreams have given to civilization all that it has of value, the spirit which serves as the lifeblood of our own country, your opportunity and mine to develop and market our talents. Let us not forget Columbus dreamed of an unknown world, staked his life on the existence of it, and discovered it. Copernicus, the great astronomer, dreamed of a multiplicity of worlds and revealed them. No one denounced him as impractical after he made his triumph. Instead, the world worshipped at his shrine, proving once more that success requires no apologies, failure permits no alibis. If the thing you wish to do is right and you believe in it, go ahead and do it. Put your dream across and never mind what they say if you meet with temporary defeat, for they perhaps do not know that every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. Henry Ford, poor and uneducated, dreamed of a horseless carriage, went to work with what tools he had, without waiting for opportunity to favor him. and now evidence of his dream belts the entire earth. He has put more wheels into operation than any man who has ever lived because he was not afraid to back his dreams. Thomas Edison dreamed of a lamp that could be operated by electricity, began where he stood to put his dream into action. And despite more than 10,000 failures, he stood by that dream until he made it a physical reality. Practical dreamers do not quit. That's important to note because there's so many people I meet in life, especially men, that have all these dreams that they want to acquire, but they're not doing anything to it. And the minute they get like one failure, they're out. Thomas Edison, it took him 10,000 failures. How many of you can say you're willing to stick in a thing and fail 10,000 times until you get your win? And if you don't stick in it for those 10,000 failures, was that even your dream? Was that even a thing you wanted, or just your ego saying, this is what I want? These are all the questions we have to ask ourselves. Do I really want this thing? Or do I just want it for the sake of having it? And that's how you'll know, because if you're not willing to put in the effort, then that tells you that it wasn't something you really wanted. Do you all know what you really want? Or do you keep saying you want this thing, but then the minute work is required, you can't do it? Right? You can't do it. Whelan dreamed of a chain of cigar stores, transformed his dream into action, and now the United Cigar Stores occupy the best corners in America. Exactly. Rosé says, when you truly want something, you have to be focused and have a one-track mind. And you have to make steps towards that thing. So many people sit around talking about all they want to do and who they're going to be, but yet that's exactly what they do. They just sit around talking about it. They don't make any movements about it. Lincoln dreamed of freedom for the Black slaves, put his dream into action, and barely missed living to see a united North and South translate his dream into reality. The Wright brothers dreamed of a machine that would fly through the air. Now one may see evidence all over the world that they dreamed soundly. Marconi dreamed of a system for harnessing the intangible forces of the ether. Evidence that he did not dream in vain may be found in every wireless and radio in the world. Moreover, Marconi's dream brought the humblest cabin and the most stately manor house side by side. I believe so. It made the people of every nation. I just know Andrew Carnegie is one of the richest men in the world and part of the 1%, his whole generation. On earth backdoor neighbors. It gave the President of the United States a medium by which he may talk to all the people of America at one time and on short notice. It may interest you to know that Marconi's friends had him taken into custody and examined in a psychopathic hospital when he announced he had discovered a principle through which he could send messages through the air without the aid of wires or other direct physical means of communication. The dreamers of today fare better. Could you imagine that his friends had him locked up in an asylum because they thought he was crazy, right? And thank God Marconi persisted, because could you imagine if Marconi gave up in that mental institution? If he gave up on his dream, we wouldn't have wireless internet today. The world has become accustomed to new discoveries. It has shown a willingness to reward the dreamer who gives the world a new idea. The greatest achievement was at first and for a time but a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn. The bird waits in the egg. And in the highest vision of the soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. Awake, arise, and assert yourself, you dreamers of the world. Your star is now in the ascendancy. The world depression brought the opportunity you have been waiting for. It taught people humility, tolerance, and open-mindedness. The world is filled with an abundance of opportunity, which the dreamers of the past never knew. A burning desire to be and to do is the starting point from which the dreamer must take off. Dreams are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. The worst thing I can't stand is a lazy person. I think there's just so much opportunity around us. And for us to just sit here getting fat, doing nothing, binge watching TV all day, it just breaks my heart to know that there's so much opportunity around us and all people are doing is just existing. It's like I get so emotional about it. I could cry because I don't want to just exist. I want to thrive. I want to like create change in this world, you know? And that's why I surround myself with people that are the change makers. And that's why I don't think I've really found my tribe yet, because everybody I hang out with, if they're just getting up, going to work, coming home, smoking weed, going to bed, living on live streams, it's not enough for me. Exactly. I'll be back. I want to live. And it's like, people always make fun of me saying like, oh, you keep changing friends every year, because I haven't found my tribe yet. I'm looking for the movers and the shakers and the change people, you know? I don't want to just be sitting here living some sort of normal life. Nah, that's not for me. That is not for me. The world no longer scoffs at the dreamer, nor calls him impractical. If you think it does, take a trip to Tennessee and witness what a dreamer president has done in the way of harnessing and using the great water power of America. A score of years ago, such a dream would have seemed like madness. You have been disappointed. You have undergone defeat. You have felt the great heart within you crushed. Take courage, for these experiences have tempered the spiritual metal of which you are made. They're assets of incomparable value. Remember, too, that all who succeed in life get off to a bad start and pass through many heartbreaking struggles before they arrive. The turning point in the lives of those who succeed usually come at the moment of some crisis through which they are introduced to their other self. John Bunyan wrote The Pilgrims' Progress, which is among the finest of all English literature, after he had been confined in prison and sorely punished because of his views on the subject of religion. O. Henry discovered the genius which slept within his brain after he had met with great misfortune and was confined in a prison cell in Columbus, Ohio. Being forced through misfortune to become acquainted with his other self and to use his imagination, he discovered himself to be a great author instead of a miserable criminal and outcast. Strange and varied are the ways of life, and stranger still are the ways of infinite intelligence, through which men are sometimes forced to undergo all sorts of punishment before discovering their own brain and their own capacity to create useful ideas through imagination. Edison, the world's greatest inventor and scientist, was a tramp telegraph operator. He failed many times before he was driven finally to the discovery of the genius which slept in his brain. That's what I mean when you have to hit rock bottom sometimes to change. But how many of us have hit rock bottom, decided to wake up and want to change, but then do nothing? Time seeps in, and the further away we get from hitting rock bottom, the more we forget about the desire to change the world, and we just become lazy. Exactly, Melly. Right? I've known people who hit rock bottom and they say they're going to do a lot of things, and then time goes on and they get comfortable back in their old life. They forgot about hitting rock bottom and they just become lazy and they never do anything with their life. So it's not enough to just hit rock bottom and know you need to change. You actually need to do it. Edison, the world's greatest Edison Sorry. Charles Dickens began by pasting labels on blacking pots. The tragedy of his first love penetrated the depth of his soul and converted him into one of the world's truly great authors. That tragedy produced first David Copperfield, then a succession of other works that made this a richer and better world for all who read his books. Disappointment over love affairs generally has the effect of driving men to drink and women to ruin. And this because most people never learn the art of transmuting their strongest emotions into dreams of a constructive nature. I'm reading from Think and Grow Rich, Smood Melly. Helen Keller became deaf, dumb, and blind shortly after birth, despite her greatest misfortune. She had written her name in the pages of history of the great. Her entire life has served as evidence that no one ever is defeated until defeat has been accepted as reality. Thank you for the fave, Daniel. Robert Burns was an illiterate country lad. He was cursed by poverty and grew up to be a drunk in the bargain. The world was made better for his having lived because he clothed beautiful thoughts in poetry and plucked a thorn and planted a rose in its place. Booker T. Washington was born in slavery, handicapped by race and color. Because he was tolerant, had an open mind at all times on all subjects, and was a dreamer, he left his impress for good on an entire race. Beethoven was deaf, Milton was blind, but their names will last as long as time endures because they dreamed and translated their dreams into organized thought. Before passing to the next chapter, kindle anew in your mind the fire of hope, faith, courage, and tolerance. If you have these states of mind and a working knowledge of the principles described here, all else that you need will come to you when you are ready for it. Let Emerson state the thought in these words: every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to thee for aid and comfort shall surely come home through open or winding passages. Every friend whom not thy fantastic will, but the great and tender soul in thee craveth, shall lock thee in his embrace. There is a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. I'm going to repeat that again. There is a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. How many of you are ready to receive your dreams as reality? Hey, Jolex. No one is ready for a thing until he believes he can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief, not hope or wish. Open-mindedness is essential for belief. Closed minds do not inspire faith, courage, or belief. Remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance, than is required to accept misery and poverty. We have choices. You can choose to accept your misery and poverty, or you can choose to accept abundance and prosperity. What are you choosing on a daily basis? Ready, but need to take better steps to make sure I'm ready. That's powerful. A great poet has correctly stated this universal truth through these lines. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty score. For life is just an employer. He gives you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. What wage of life are you asking? Are you asking only for the bare minimum? Or are you asking for the riches that you can have. As a fitting climax to this chapter, I wish to introduce one of the most unusual persons I have ever known. I first saw him 24 years ago, a few minutes after he was born. He came into the world without any physical ears, and the doctor admitted, when pressed for an opinion, that his child might be deaf and mute for life. I challenged the doctor's opinion. I had the right to do so. I was the child's father. I reached a decision and rendered an opinion, but I expressed the opinion silently in the secrecy of my own heart. I decided that my son would hear and speak. Nature could send me a child without ears, but nature could not induce me to accept the reality of the affliction. In my own mind, I knew that my son would hear and speak. How? I was sure there must be a way, and I knew I would find it. I thought of the words of the immortal Emerson. The whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. The right word, desire. More than anything else, I desired that my son should not be a deaf mute. From that desire, I never receded, not for 1 second. Many years previously, I had written, our only limitations are those we set in our own minds. I'm going to repeat that again. Our only limitations are those we set in our own minds. For the first time, I wondered if that statement were true. Lying on the bed in front of me was a newly born child without the natural equipment of hearing. Even though he might hear and speak, he was obviously disfigured for life. Surely this was a limitation which that child had not set up in his own mind. What could I do? Somehow I would find a way to transplant into that child's mind my own burning desire for ways and means of conveying sound to his brain without the aid of ears. As soon as the child was old enough to cooperate, I would fill his mind so completely with a burning desire to hear that nature would, by methods of her own, translate it into physical reality. All this thinking took place in my own mind, but I spoke of it to no one. Every day I renewed the pledge I had made to myself not to accept a deaf mute for a son. As he grew older and began to take notice of things around him, we observed that he had a slight degree of hearing. When he reached the age when children usually begin talking, he made no attempt to speak. But we could tell by his actions that he could hear certain sounds slightly. That was all I needed. I was convinced that if he could hear even slightly, he might develop still greater hearing. Then something happened, which gave me hope. It came from an entirely unexpected source. We bought a Victrola. When the child heard the music for the first time, he went into ecstasy and promptly appropriated the machine. He soon showed a preference for certain records. Among them, It's a Long Way to Tipperary. On one occasion, he played that piece over and over for almost 2 hours, standing in front of the Victrola with his teeth clamped on the edge of the case. The significance of this self-formed habit of his did not become clear to us until years afterward, for we had never heard of the principle of bone conduction of sound at that time. Shortly after he appropriated the Victrola, I discovered that he could hear me quite clearly when I spoke with my lips touching his mastoid bone or at the base of his brain. These discoveries placed in my possession the necessary media by which I began to translate into reality my burning desire to help my son. By that time, he was making stabs at speaking certain words. The outlook was far more encouraging, but desire backed by faith knows no such word as impossible. Hi, James. Having determined that he could hear the sound of my voice plainly, I began immediately to transfer to his mind the desire to hear and speak. I soon discovered that the child enjoyed bedtime stories, so I went to work creating stories designed to develop in him self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and be normal. There was one story in particular which I emphasized by giving it some new and dramatic coloring. It was designed to plant in his mind the thought that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Despite the fact that all the philosophy I had examined clearly indicated that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. I'm going to repeat that. Every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. I must confess that I had not the slightest idea how this affliction could ever become an asset. However, I continued my practice of wrapping that philosophy in bedtime stories to my child, hoping the time would come when he would find some plan by which his handicap of not having heirs could be made to serve some useful purpose. Reason told me plainly that there was no adequate compensation for the lack of heirs and natural hearing. Desire, backed by faith, pushed reason aside and inspired me to carry on. As I analyze the experience in retrospect, I can see now that my son's faith in me had much to do with the astounding results. He did not question anything I told him. I sold him the idea that he had a distinct advantage over his older brother and that this advantage would reflect itself in many ways. For example, the teachers in school would observe that he had no heirs, and because of this, they would show him special attention and treat him with kindness. They always did. His mother saw to that by visiting the teachers and arranging with them to give the child the extra attention necessary. I sold him the idea, too, that when he became old enough to sell newspapers, he would have a big advantage over his brother for the reason that people would pay extra money for his newspapers because they could see he was a boy with no ears. We could notice that gradually the child's hearing was improving. Moreover, he had not the slightest tendency to be self-conscious. When he was about 7, he showed the first evidence that our method of servicing his mind was bearing fruit. For several months, he begged for the privilege of selling newspapers, but his mother would not give her consent. She was afraid his deafness made it unsafe for him to go on the street alone. Finally, he took matters into his own hands. One afternoon, when he was left at home with the servants, he climbed through the kitchen window, shimmied to the ground, and set out on his own. He borrowed 6 cents in capital from the neighborhood shoemaker, invested it in newspapers, sold out, reinvested, and kept repeating until late in the evening. After balancing his accounts and paying back the 6 cents he had borrowed, he had a net profit of 42 cents. When we got home that night, we found him in bed asleep with the money tightly clenched in his hands. His mother opened his hand, removing the coins, and cried. Of all things, crying over her son's first victory seemed so inappropriate. My reaction was the reverse. I laughed heartily, for I knew that my endeavor to plant in the child's mind an attitude of faith had been successful. His mother saw in his first business venture a little deaf boy who had gone out in the streets and risked his life to earn money. I saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant little businessman whose stock in himself had been increased 100% because he had gone into business on his own initiative and had won. The transaction pleased me because I knew that he had given evidence of a trait of resourcefulness that would go with him all through life. Later events proved this to be true. When his older brother wanted something, he would lie down on the floor, kick his feet in the air, and cry for it and get it. When the little deaf boy wanted something, he would plan a way to earn the money, then buy it for himself. He still follows that plan. Truly, my own son has taught me that handicaps can be converted into stepping stones on which one may climb towards some goal, unless you accept it as an obstacle and use alibis. How many of us use alibis all the time? I can't do this because that. I can't go work out because it's snowing. I can't eat right because we're on a cruise. I can't start the second job because I need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. How many times we make excuses? The little deaf boy went through the grades, high school, and college without being able to hear his teachers except when they shouted loudly at close range. He would not go to a school for the deaf. We would not let him learn sign language. Good morning, Brian. We were determined that he should live a normal life and associate with normal children. And we stood by that decision, although it cost us many heated debates with school officials. When he was in high school, he tried an electrical hearing aid, but it was of no value. During his last week in college, 18 years after the operation, something happened which marked the most important turning point of his life. Through which seemed to be mere chance, he came into possession of electrical hearing device, which was sent to him on trial. He was slow about testing it due to his disappointment with a similar device earlier. Finally, he picked the instrument up and more or less carelessly placed it on his head, hooked up the battery, and lo, as if by a stroke of magic, his lifelong desire for normal hearing became a reality. For the first time in his life, he heard practically as well as any person with normal hearing. God moves in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. Overjoyed because of the changed world which had been brought to him through his hearing device, he rushed to the telephone, called his mother, and heard her voice perfectly. The next day, he plainly heard the voices of his professors in class for the first time in his life. Good morning, Em. I'm reading the chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich. I'm nearly done. Previously, he could hear them only when they shouted at short range. He heard the radio. He heard talking pictures. For the first time in his life, he could converse freely with other people without needing them to shout. Truly, he had come into possession of a changed world. We had refused to accept nature's error, and by persistent desire, we had induced nature to correct that error through the only practical means available. Desire had commenced to pay dividends, but the victory was not yet complete. The boy still had to find a definite way to convert his handicap into an asset. Hardly realizing the significance of what had already been accomplished, but intoxicated with the joy of his new discovery world of sound, he wrote a letter to the manufacturer of the hearing aid, enthusiastically describing his experience. Something in his letter, something perhaps which was not written on the lines but back of them, caused the company to invite him to New York. When he arrived, he was escorted through the factory, and while talking with the chief engineer, telling him about his changed world, a hunch, an idea, or an inspiration, call it what you wish, flashed into his mind. Good morning. It was this impulse of thought which converted his affliction into an asset destined to pay dividends in both money and happiness to thousands for all time to come. The sum and substance of that impulse of thought was this. It occurred to him that he might be of help to the millions of deaf people who go through life without the benefit of hearing devices if he could find a way to tell them the story of his changed world. Then and there, he reached a decision to devote the remainder of his life to rendering useful service to the hard of hearing. For an entire month, he carried on an intensive research during which he analyzed the entire marketing system of the manufacturer of the hearing device and created means and ways of communicating with the hard of hearing all over the world. When this was done, he put in writing a 2-year plan based on his findings and presented the plan to the company. He was given a position instantly. Little did he dream when he went to work that he was destined to bring hope and practical relief to thousands of deaf people. Shortly after he became associated with the manufacturer of his hearing aid, he invited me to attend a class conducted by his company. I had never heard of such a form of education, and I visited the class skeptical but hopeful that my time would not be entirely wasted. Here I saw a demonstration which gave me a greatly large vision of what I had done to arouse and keep alive in my son's mind the desire for normal hearing. I saw deaf mutes actually being taught to hear and speak through application of the self-same principle I used more than 20 years previously in saving my son from deaf mutism. Thus, through some strange turn of the wheel of fate, my son Blair and I have been destined to aid in correcting deaf mutism for those as yet unborn, because we are the only living human beings, as far as I know, who have established definitely the fact that deaf mutism can be corrected to the extent of restoring to normal life those who suffer with this affliction. It has been done for one, it will be done for others. There is no doubt in my mind that Blair would have been a deaf all his life if his mother and I had not managed to shape his mind as we did. The doctor who attended at his birth told us confidentially, the child might never hear or speak. A few weeks ago, Dr. Irving Voorhees, a noted specialist, examined Blair thoroughly. He was astounded when he learned how well my son now hears and speaks, and said his examination showed that theoretically, the boy should not be able to hear at all, but he does. When I planted in his mind a desire to hear and talk and live as a normal person, there went with that impulse some strange influence which caused nature to become bridge builder and span the gulf of silence between his brain and the outer world by some means which the keenest medical specialists have not been able to interpret. It would be sacrilege for me to even conjecture as to how nature performed. It would be unforgivable if I neglected to tell the world as much as I know of the humble part I assumed in the strange experience. It is my duty and a privilege to say, I believe, and not without reason, that nothing is impossible to the person who backs desire with fate. Verily, a burning desire has devious ways of transmuting itself into its physical equivalent. Blair desired normal hearing. Now he has it. He was born with a handicap which might easily have sent him with a less defined desire to the street with a bundle of pencils and a tin cup. That handicap now promises to serve as the medium by which he will render useful service to many millions of hard of hearing. Also give him useful employment at adequate financial compensation the remainder of his life. The little white lies I planted in his mind when he was a child by leading him to believe his affliction would become an asset which he could capitalize has justified itself. Verily, there is nothing right or wrong which belief plus burning desire cannot make real. These qualities are free to everyone. In all my experience in dealing with men and women who had personal problems, I never handled a single case which more definitely demonstrates the power of desire. Authors sometimes make the mistake of writing of subjects of which they have but superficial or elementary knowledge. It has been my good fortune to have had the privilege of testing the soundness of the power of desire through the affliction of my own son. If Mother Nature bends to the will of desire, it is logical that mere men can defeat a burning desire. Is it logical that mere men can defeat a burning desire? Strange is the power of the human mind. We do not understand the method by which it uses every circumstance, every individual, every physical thing within its reach as a means of transmuting desire into its physical counterpart. Perhaps science will uncover this secret. You guys are all right. I planted in my son's mind the desire to hear and speak. That desire now became his reality. I planted in his mind the desire to convert his greatest handicap into his greatest asset. I mixed fate with a desire for normal hearing, which I passed on to my son. I communicated my desire to him in every way available through persistent, continuous effort over a period of years. And then third, he believed me. As this chapter was being completed, news came of the death of Schumann Heink. Stupendous success as a singer. I quote the paragraph because the clue it contains is none other than desire. Early in her career, Madame Schumann Heink visited the director of the Vienna Court Opera to have him test her voice, but he did not test it. After taking one look at the awkward and poorly dressed girl, he exclaimed, none too gently, with such a face and with no personality at all, how can you ever expect to succeed in opera? My good child, give up the idea, buy a sewing machine and go to work. You can never be a singer. Never is a long time. The director of the Vienna Court Opera knew much about the technique of singing. He knew little about the power of desire when it assumes the proportion of an obsession. If he had known more of that power, he would not have made the mistake of condemning genius without giving it an opportunity. Several years ago, one of my business associates became ill. He became worse as time went on and finally was taken to the hospital for an operation. Just before he was wheeled into the operating room, I looked at him and wondered how anyone as thin as he could possibly go through a major operation successfully. The doctor warned me there was little, if any, chance of my ever seeing my friend alive again. But that was the doctor's opinion. It was not the opinion of the patient. Just before he was wheeled away, he whispered to me, "Do not be disturbed, Chief. I will be out of here in a few days." The attending nurse looked at me with pity, but the patient did come through safely. After it was all over, his physician said nothing but his own desire to live saved him. He never would have pulled through if he had not refused to accept the possibility of death. I believe in the power of desire backed by faith because I have seen this power lift men from lowly beginnings to places of power and wealth. I have seen it rob the grave of its victims. I have seen it serve as the medium by which men staged a comeback after having been defeated in 100 different ways. I have seen it provide my own son with a normal, happy life. How can one harness and use the power of desire? This has been answered through this book. This message is going out to the world at the end of the longest and most devastating depression America has ever known. It is reasonable to presume that the message may come to the attention of many who have been wounded by the depression, those who have lost fortunes, others who have lost their positions, and great numbers who must reorganize their plans and stage a comeback. Hi, Mild. I'm finishing chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich. To all these, I wish to convey the thought that all achievement, no matter what may be its nature or its purpose, must begin with an intense, burning desire for something definite. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry, which she has never divulged, nature wraps up the impulse of strong desire, that something which recognizes no such world as impossible and accepts no such reality as failure. I'm going to read that last paragraph again. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry, which she has never divulged, nature wraps up in the impulse of strong desire that something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no such reality as failure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We have just completed Chapter 2 of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Thank you, YouTube, for tuning in. See me in my next stream for Chapter 3.